Hello, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we are learning the system of Reiki to be rooted, to be spacious, to be connected, and to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. Welcome back. Today is the first day of spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. And as has become our custom here at Heartscapes, we open each season with a 21-day practice, diving deep into a particular practice or concept from the traditions that form the foundation of the system of Reiki, primarily Shingon Buddhism and the practice of Shinto from Japan. And sometimes we work with specific practices from those traditions. Sometimes we create a new practice that brings these traditions alive in our life. In these ways, we are able to be diligent in our practice, as the fourth precept invites us. Do this in manageable, bite-sized pieces, a short practice consistently for 21 days of practice together in community. So for those of you who are joining live, welcome. For those of you watching the recording later, our replay crew, welcome. For those of you watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to this space. So as we open the portal to spring 2023, and thinking about feeling into what practice would be joyful and appropriate to work with in this season, I was reflecting on the ways in which, while this is true in all of the seasons, it is especially vibrant in the spring, the way in which all of the elements of the world integrate and collaborate together to bring forward new life. Again, this integration of the elements of life are always present in every season, but we see it so vibrantly in spring as life begins to come back into vibrancy, into motion before our eyes as the season opens. And so we wanted to work with a practice and with a concept that is rooted in integration, in connection. And so this season we are working with the concept of Sanmitsu. So in this first session of this cycle, I'm going to do a little bit of teaching about the concept of Sanmitsu, about its origins in Japanese Buddhism, about how it shows up inside of the system of Reiki, and how we can relate to it as we go through this practice time together. And then we'll do a little piece of practice at the end of today. So let's jump into it. For this cycle, as we walk through the portal of spring, we are stepping inside of Sanmitsu, practices for the body, the breath, and mind from the origins of Reiki. I wanted us to begin with this quote from the founder of Shingon Buddhism from the 6th century. This is the words of Kukai. All sentient beings possess by nature the same mystic forms of action as the Buddhas, as it is technically called, Muso no Sanmitsu. But they do not realize them until they successfully perform the prescribed method of practice and attain unity with the Buddha. So what is Kukai implying here? A couple of things. Firstly, he's implying that it is possible for those who walk the path of this practice to become enlightened in a single lifetime, which is a belief that is present in some branches of Buddhism and not others. The idea that in a single lifetime, one can walk the path of enlightenment and become one with the universe in this way, in the same way as the Buddha. He goes further though, and he says that essentially, we are all already enlightened. We already possess by nature, the same mystic forms and actions as the Buddha. That right now, in this moment, as you walk through your life, you already have everything that you need to realize your oneness with the universe. In fact, that oneness is already existing. It always has, and it always will. The challenge is that we don't realize it. We don't remember it. We have been distracted by this truth. Perhaps we came into the world as a tiny infant, fully aware of this unification with all of life and the universe, but we've been distracted by the mundanities and the challenges of life, the traumas and the difficulties of walking through a dangerous world in a vulnerable body. We've been just distracted, and all we need to do is to remember. In that way, Shingon Buddhism and Buddhism as a whole is offered to us as a pathway to remember, to reclaim that experience of oneness. And as a distillation of the concepts and practices in Buddhism, the system of Reiki is similarly a pathway offered to us for this experience of remembering. And so we are given this opportunity to be in practice together in ways that help us to remember this fundamental truth. And this is one of the things that has always felt so generous and so gentle to me about the system of Reiki. Because a concept like enlightenment, like oneness with the universe, like remembering the wholeness of our true self, can feel rather daunting. It certainly did to me when I first started learning about these practices and these perspectives. However, the system of Reiki gives us an accessible, simple, graceful, elegant pathway that we can follow step by step in order to eventually get to this realization. And each step along that path matters. It's not a goal-oriented, finish line-oriented practice. Every moment that we step into our practice is a victory. And it's an experience, an initial experience all to itself. And this has made this concept of remembering our oneness with the universe, which sounds delightful. It sounds wonderful. It sounds like the kind of life that I want to live, and perhaps you do too. It makes that really immense task accessible to me, right? Because the practices inside the system of Reiki are simple. And the practices inside the system of Reiki are organized according to a variety of principles. One of those principles is Sanmitsu. So let's jump back into the slides and learn a little bit more about this principle. I encountered this principle prior to my work with Reiki, or perhaps maybe timeline-wise, this was really right at the beginning. I was working with another teacher named Norma Wong, and she is a former state legislator in the state of Hawaii and is also a Zen priest. And I was working with her in the context of learning a Tai Chi form that she practices, as well as a number of other principles related to social and political organizing and the way in which spiritual practice is essential for social change to be sustainable and to be robust. And inside of this teaching session, Norma said something that just really stuck with me and has stayed with me ever since. And it's this quote that's here on the screen. The mind, body, and spirit are hardwired together. To behave as if they are not is to not operate at your full potential. And that just really struck me as powerful, because my experience up until that point had already been a sense of disconnection between my body, my mind, and my spirit, my essential nature. I was taught from a very young age, and perhaps you were too, that we should prioritize the activities of the mind, that thinking and reason and logic and problem solving were of highest priority and were to be highest rewarded. And it didn't matter so much our intuition or our senses in the body, our physical embodied knowledge was less important than what we carried in the mind. The spirit was rarely even talked about, right? And so when she said this, that the mind, the body, and the spirit are hardwired together, that made sense to me because I'd already felt this sense of disconnection between those parts of myself. But that second part, that when we operate as if they are not, as if our body, our mind, and our spirit are not meant to be perfectly integrated, bringing all of the aspects of ourselves together to bring those to bear on our life, the decisions of our life, that to operate as if that were not true is to severely limit our potential. And she meant potential in all realms of life, all ways in which the human experience has potential are limited when our body, our mind, our spirit, our voice, our energy are disconnected or dissociated from each other. So that stuck with me. So much so that that quote has been in my email signature line ever since for years. And what I now know is that Norma was speaking of Sanmitsu. So what is Sanmitsu? Sanmitsu, the word in Japanese, translates as the three mystic practices or the three mysteries sometimes. And those mystic practices and those mysteries are really at the heart of Buddhism and at the heart of the system of Reiki. Within the system of Reiki, we learn the system through three levels. In the original Japanese, those levels are called Shoden, or first teachings, Okuden, or inner teachings, and Shimpiden, mystery teachings. And we progress through these teachings gently and continuously, and in a way that spirals around the concepts and the teachings. We return again and again to these points of reference. In other words, it's not a teaching that takes us in a straight line. It's a teaching that spirals around our experience and spirals around itself so that we continuously encounter the elements of the teachings again and again from different points in our development. We spiral towards the inner mystic center of the practice. And when we get there, we find that we've actually been practicing it all along, but in smaller, manageable pieces, easier for our mind and our body and our spirit to integrate. And so the Sanmitsu, the three mystic practices, are with us throughout the entire journey of working with the system of Reiki. And it becomes clarified as we approach the mystery teachings. So let's dig into this word a little bit, Sanmitsu. So the three mystic teachings, or the three mysteries, have everything to do with the ways in which we perceive the world, the ways in which we as a human are able to understand, move through, and perceive our life, the world, the mysteries, all of it. And that is through our body, through our mind, and through our energy, also conceived of as speech or breath. So when we talk about energy, speech, and breath, we're really referring to the same point of experience. So when we break these down, we begin with the mind, the imitsu. This is the mental practice, the mystic practice of the mind, mental mystic practice, imitsu. And as an example of how we would work with the mind inside of the system of Reiki and inside of the original forms of Buddhism, we can see that in the form of the mandala. Each of these three mystic practices has a quintessential form that you probably have heard of or encountered or perhaps worked with in the past. So we begin with the mandala, the practice of the mind, an image that we contemplate, that we bring into our mind, into our mind's eye, our mental awareness, and that helps us to focus our mind onto the mysteries of life in various ways. The body, the Shinmitsu, or bodily mystic practice. Inside of this mitsu, inside of this mystic practice, we can work with the mudra, positions of the body, positions of the hand, of the arms, of the body, of the head, that help us again to focus on our mystic connection, that help us to embody, literally, to put our body in the shape of the mystery. When we work with our energy, our speech, our breath, or perhaps what Norma Wong meant when she referred to the spirit, we're talking about the kumitsu, or the verbal mystic practice. And here we have the mantra, the recitation of sacred sounds and words in a way that is focused, that is aligned with our intention to remember our oneness with the universe. We have mantra. Inside of the system of Reiki, we work with all three of these things. When we think about mandala, practices of the imitsu, the mental mystic practices, we can look at the symbols that are incorporated into the system of Reiki. When we're talking about the Shinmitsu of the body, the bodily mystic practice, and the idea of mudra, we can think about the hand positions that are used in Tenohira in the hand-based healing practices. On a more subtle level, we can think about the ways in which we hold the posture of our body when we're in meditation, the careful way in which we align our body to best support whatever practice that we're in. And when we're talking about the energy or the speech, the breath, the kumitsu, the verbal mystic practice, we have the mantras of the recitation of the precepts. We have the recitation of the mantras that are associated with the three symbols. We have the teachings themselves that are spoken with word. And we have the way in which, on the more subtle level, we align the breath with the movement of the body and with the focus of the mind in every practice that we do. While we're looking at these individually and we'll look a little bit more in a moment at the characteristics of these three mysteries, these three mystic practices. Ultimately, where we're going is the integration, the unification of these three within ourselves as an individual, as a sovereign person, and between ourselves and the rest of life. And so in the system of Reiki, every practice that we do is intended to bring these three aspects of ourselves, these three mysteries of our existence, these three forms of mystic practice into collaboration and alignment with each other, to reintegrate these aspects of ourselves. And what we see is that because the system of Reiki is an effective and elegant system that really aligns well with our human experience, we know that some of us are going to be more predisposed to understand and more easily work with the body, or with the mind, or with the voice. And so different practices within the system will lead with one or the other of these elements. So there'll be practices that are more body-centered, more mind-centered, more breath or voice-centered. However, we must not forget that in each of these, we still engage the other two. All three are brought together. Slowly over time, as we do this, we experience a reintegration of ourself. And I'm saying that, I'm defining that, I'm using those words specifically from my own experience, because as I shared before, I come from an experience of dissociation between, in particular, my mind and my body, which then cut off my ability to speak clearly from the heart with compassion, but also with clear boundaries. So my experience was of dissociation between my mind and my body. One of the ways that that looked, for example, was if I felt really afraid or startled, there was something really intense or stressful happening, particularly if I had to make a decision about something, my mind would kind of freeze up and cloud over, and it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to make a decision in those conditions. So that would be that freeze response, and the fight, flight, or freeze, response that we have really activating in a way that that I had no control over and that was inappropriate to many of the situations that it was in. Since I've been working with these practices, I no longer have that experience. I no longer have that experience of shutting down and freezing in my mind when there's something startling or challenging and I'm called upon to make a decision. So that was a very noticeable and incredibly impactful change in my lived experience as a result of working with Sanmitsu, working with practices that integrate the aspects of our experience. So let's look at these a little bit more closely. So in terms of our direct experience, our body is the most tangible and easy to access of these three. Right? Our body is solid. It's easy to perceive using our senses. We can see it, we can touch it, we can hear it, we can smell it. It's a very clear indication of who and what we are as a being in this world. It's also associated with earth, the physical body of the earth. On the other side, on the other extreme, we have the mind. Now, the mind is intangible, it's ephemeral, it's difficult to perceive with our senses. We can't see the mind, we can't hear it, we can't smell it or taste it. It's very difficult to pin down and even define. And so it can be the most difficult for us to work with. And I don't mean working with it in terms of thinking or problem solving, right? Some of us are extremely good at that, using the certain capacities of the mind having to do with navigating, challenges and problems. But I'm talking about the more unfettered mind, the mind that is associated with spaciousness, with the universe, with perceiving the totality of life. Our mind can be very scattered in our day-to-day experience. It can be very difficult to focus on one thing, particularly if you're like me and have ADHD and have a really hard time just really calling in the mental focus to stay with something long enough to really have a direct experience with it. And that is essential for practicing the system of Reiki and really practicing most contemplative spiritual practices, is the ability to focus the mind. And it's an ability that can be very challenging, especially in our modern times when there are so many distractions, when our minds are being pulled in so many different places at once. And, we don't have a lot of opportunities to train our mind to settle and to focus on one thing on this moment. So the system of Reiki is really designed to help us to do that. And it's essential that we have this capacity to focus the mind in order to work with all of the rest of the system. And so the body, tangible, easier to work with, perhaps. It's easier to perceive the gestures of the body. We've got the mind kind of on the opposite side of that. And the bridge between the two is our breath, our voice, our energy. These things are semi-tangible. We can feel the sensation of the breath. We can hear the voice. We can feel the vibration of the voice in our body. We can feel energy moving in our body by way of heat or tingling sensations. Whether or not we're even intending to practice any kind of energy medicine, anybody can feel the sensation of their own life vitality moving in your body. Again, through sensations like heat, like tingling, like just feeling energized, right? So while the breath, the voice, the energy can't be seen under normal circumstances, it cannot necessarily be touched or grabbed or held onto the way that the body can. It can be perceived by many of our senses, and it has a certain semi-tangibility to it that makes it a little bit easier to focus on. And so it can be experienced as the bridge between the tangible body and the intangible mind. And all of the practices within the system, of course, very essentially begin with the breath. And so that's a little snapshot of the ways in which we might, just on a day-to-day basis, experience the three mystic practices, or the three mysteries of the body, the mind, and the voice. And we're going to just close today with a very brief initial practice. As we go through this series, we're going to be working with practices that lead with the body, of course, the other two pieces being integrated, with practices that lead with the voice or the breath, and practices that lead with the mind. We'll build on those as the days progress over the next, after day, 20 days. For those of you watching on YouTube, we'll be posting samples of each of those weeks. So there won't be all 21 videos, but there will be pieces of each one, ample enough for you to practice along with us. Okay, so let's close with a bit of a practice. So those of you who have done practice or classes with me will have experienced this before, probably many times. And this is just simply the way in which we prepare ourselves to do any other practice. So this is our prep. And it is a prep that very specifically has us to bring our attention to the body, the mind, and the voice, and to begin to bring those things into alignment with each other. We do that before we do any other practice so that we set ourselves up for success, to be able to, as much as we can in a given moment, really drop into that experience of unification, of bringing together all of our parts of ourself, so that we can have the greatest possible success in remembering our wholeness, remembering our connection with all of life. Okay, so the first thing we do is to decide what practice we're going to do. Today, we're going to practice bringing our attention to our Sanmitsu, our body, our voice, and our mind. We then put our body in a position that is supportive of our practice. And so that can look different ways depending on the practice. For today, what that's going to look like is feeling comfortable and well supported. That can be standing, you can be seated, you can be lying down, but we want to be careful with lying down because that can put our mind in that really restful place, and it can be easy for the mind to wander when we are lying down. So I'm going to recommend that we stick with sitting up or standing up, but doing that in a way that feels supported, that where you can ease into the support below you. You can let the structure of your body hold you well. You might notice if your shoulders are slumping or your back is arching at all, and just maybe take a couple of moments to invite your body to come into a more upright position. So roll the shoulders back a couple of times. Maybe arch our back to just let ourselves come into that supported, easeful, upright position. We want to be sure that our feet and or our sit bones are firmly connecting with the ground or the supports below us, that we can create that sense of stability, of a firm foundation below us. This is incredibly important because we want to indicate, we want to signal to our whole being that we are safe and secure and held, that we have a strong rooted foundation on which to build our practice, on which to open up our awareness into these wider places. We have to have a firm foundation to begin. And so taking a couple of breaths here, just noticing if your body feels supported and firm, if it feels like you have a strong foundation that you can ease into. And then we take a couple of breaths here to relax into this posture. And as you take these breaths, invite the muscles of your belly to begin to be soft. We want to allow the muscles of the belly and of our chest, of our shoulders to be relaxed as much as possible so that our body can expand easily with the breath, and we can invite the breath into this posture for practice. And so in your next couple of exhales, just really inviting release of any tension you might be holding in your belly. Noticing if your belly feels constricted around the breath at all, inviting some relaxation. We want the belly to expand with your inhale so that as you breathe in, the breath feels like it's moving all the way down into the belly. And the belly is expanding before the chest expands. And then it gently contracts as we exhale. And in this way, we bring our breath, we bring our energy into this posture for practice. We bring our body and our breath into alignment with each other by putting our body in a position that is supported and that is expansive and makes room for the breath. And then we allow the breath to move in and down, expand the belly, gently contract the belly, easefully moving in and out of our body, and being aware, paying attention to that sensation. And as we pay attention to the sensation of the breath, we begin to invite our mind into this posture for practice. We rest our attention on the sensation of the breath moving in and down. We allow the movement of the breath, the physical sensation of it, the tangibility of that sensation to draw our attention back from all the places that we've spent it today, to rest our focus on the movement of the breath in and down. And allow that movement, allow that sensation to draw our mind, our focus, our attention inward and downward. And this may take a number of repetitions because our mind might be scattered in many different places. There are times when my attention is so divided that it takes many breaths with gentle reminders and invitations. Come back to me, mind, come back to me, attention. Rest on the breath, move in and down, come back home, come back to the center, come back into the belly, rest in the center of my being, in this homecoming place. Just for today, just for this moment, rest the attention on the movement of your breath in and down, drawing your attention all the way down into your low belly, just below your belly button, deep into the center of your body. This is the first place we begin, the first diamond, the first stop on the map of any practice within the system of Reiki. It's the hara, the energy center in our low belly. And so let's take 3 breaths together, practicing, focusing our attention in this point, just below the belly button, deep into the center of your body, the hara. Let's just take 3 breaths together, resting our mind here. Just noticing the sensations in your body as you rest in this breathing pattern. Noticing the alignment between the posture of your body, posture of your breath, and the posture of your mind. Notice that it doesn't take a lot of effort to come into this posture. It just takes our attention and our intention to be as focused as we can on our own evolution, our own expansion, our own remembering who and what we are. So friends, when you feel ready, bringing your hands together at your heart, the gesture of gasso, the gesture that means the coming together of opposites, unification, integration, symbolized with this simple mudra of the hands coming together in a prayer position at the heart. The gesture of the body aligned with our breath, with our mind focused, as a gesture of completion for this practice. So, friends, I want us to end with another quote. This one from one of my teachers, Franz Stina, in his book, The Inner Heart of Reiki. Ultimately, we need to merge with the mind, body, and energy of the universe. Or, in other words, we need to realize that our mind, body, and energy is the same as the universe mind, body, and energy. And I love that this quote really directs our attention to the mystery teachings and to where we are headed as we spiral around and around and around inside of these teachings. That ultimately it's about unification with everything, but we begin with unification within our own self, our own body, our own mind, our own energy and voice, unified and integrated together. Simply, step by step, practice by practice. It is simple, but it is not easy because there are so many other things pulling at our time, which is why it really matters that you've chosen to be on this journey, to take 21 days or take pieces out of the next 21 days to focus on practice. Tomorrow, we will be back again with practices of the body that front load the body, and we'll continue on this journey of discovery of the Sanmitsu. So thank you all so much for taking this journey with us. Thank you to those live, to those on the recording, to those who are watching these sample videos that are going to be shared on YouTube. We thank you for being with us, and we will see you tomorrow. We love you. Goodbye.